All right, there. Thank you so much for staying with us. The reactivation of the Port Harcourt refinery marks a significant turning point for Nigeria's downstream oil sector after years of stalled attempts. With its return, the refinery is set to rival the already operational Dangote refinery in contributing to Nigeria's aim of becoming a petrol exporting nation. In an unprecedented announcement, the NNPCL announced that previously the moribund Port Harcourt refinery was now operational and would begin daily production loading for marketers. While the NNPCL confirmed that the previously idle refinery located in Alasar Eleme refinery complex, about 25 kilometers east from Port Harcourt, has been successfully revitalized and was loading petroleum products for distribution to marketers. The announcement of a significant milestone in Nigeria's efforts to enhance domestic refining capacity caught many unawares. Before the rollout day, there has been a sorry state of failure in the delivery of refinery after its missed production rollout deadline for the 7th time in September. The oil giant technically withdrew its promising a new date, but finally, the refinery has come on board. Mr. Enebi Okpalua is the head natural resource and climate governance with Budget Nigeria. He joins me from Abuja. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the program this afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Well, I think it's good again for us to start this conversation by educating Nigerians on some still don't understand. They think what happened in the Port Harcourt refinery was the regular turnaround maintenance. But there's a difference between a total rehabilitation and a maintenance. What do you make of that? And what's your understanding of the situation at that place? We just saw NLC, TUC, Pengasan, Nupeng members live. We got the pictures. They are there now, and the machines are roaring. The engine is working. So something is happening in that place.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So that is true. We've had confirmation from, let's say, independent agents, in quotes, trying to verify the operationalization of the Port Harcourt refinery. And I think that has been because of certain perceptions in public that the resumption of the refinery was probably a hoax. Well, we've had several people go there to verify that production is ongoing. This is the combination of efforts that started under the Buhari administration with the aim of restoring domestic refining capacity. Like I said, the resumption has missed deadlines several times. It was initially supposed to resume last year, if that was in the delayed deadline, and then it was moved to the end of last quarter of last year, and then first quarter of 2024. But now we can see that the refinery has resumed operations, and oil marketers are now looking to start lifting petroleum products from the refinery gates, if that has not commenced already.
Do you think this really, or what impact do you think this would have in the market, considering already we have a Dangote refinery of a 650,000 barrels capacity on a daily basis?
Okay, so that would be a bit tricky to analyze, but let's look at it from this perspective. In terms of availability of products in domestic markets, that would help a little. I will say why. In terms of quantity of, let me just take petrol, for example. As we heard, or based on press statements, the refinery is operating at 70% capacity as of today, if I'm right.
No, we just got an information. Sorry, they say it's now 90%. Just now, that just came in.
Now, okay, that's very good. And in that case, we should be doing somewhere around 70% would have been around 3.1 million liters of petrol. So 90% should be around 3.9 thereabout million liters of petrol a day that refinery can contribute to local markets. Now, this is just based on standard analysis that applies to general refineries. But however, with each refinery, there are certain uniqueness with them. There is the, like I said, capacity, and then there's the efficiency, And then there's a spread of final products that comes out as end products. So then depending on how much diesel you produce, how much petrol you produce. But generally speaking, based on standard analysis, we should be able to get somewhere around close to 50% of total refinery capacity at 90% efficiency. So we are looking at perhaps somewhere close to 3.9 million liters of petrol, excluding other refined products. That is the Port Harcourt refinery. If you take the same analysis and apply it to the Dangote refinery, you're looking at somewhere above 40 million liters of petrol, just petrol a day. So of what impact that would have in terms of total domestic market, perhaps a little, I don't know about the terms of kind of competition that will pose to the Dangote refinery, but I would say at least for the domestic market around refinery, it should help. Also, when we look at the consumption in Nigeria, that is still left to be determined. There are a lot of numbers throwing left and right, and because we don't have up-to-date data from the NMDPRA, the last data we have in terms of domestic consumption is as of August last year, while budget has been following the process. And at that time, after the subsidy was removed, production dropped from around 65 million liters a day to around 45 million liters, roughly about 22% drop in consumption. That was restored by November. Product consumption increased again back to pre-subsidy removal levels in terms of imports, because as at that time the NNPC had stopped. The NMDPRA had stopped posting data, but based on NNPC import data, we've seen that consumption or import has risen back to the subsidy removal eras. That was as of November, December last year. So in terms of what the actual production or actual consumption of refined petroleum is in Nigeria as of today, there is no data or statistics that can prove that. And even the head of the Dangote refinery also alluded to that there are certain issues with the consumption number. So why am I saying this? Because if we knew the consumption we had in the country, then we can tell if supply is sufficient enough for our domestic market, or if we need to supplement, or if it's enough, how much can we supply to neighboring countries. As of today, the data we have available cannot sufficiently answer that question. So of what impact that will have, yes, it will add to the security of supply in terms of production, in terms of quantity of supply, but in terms of pricing, the market is still exposed to the dollarization of the crude oil industry. Crude oil production is still done in dollars, so we cannot escape that. And so we have exchange rates that applies. But in terms of local arrangements within the NNPC to supply crude to refineries, then that may help a little, but the significance may not be much unless there are other issues in the value chain or supply chain that we do not know about for now. But as of today, I think that's the situation. In terms of security of supply, yes, it will contribute to that.
This necessarily, like many analysts like you have said, might not affect price of the product, because even the dollar, to like you identified, crude is sold in dollars. So of course, one way or the other, we still have to stay with it. But the consumption you talked about is also something that is burning. Some say there's been a reduction. Some say there's... what do you make of the consumption figures? Do you think that a lot of work needs to be done in that space? Then ramping up crude production is important to also supply all of these refineries. We have the moribund one, the smaller ones. We have all of those refineries everywhere. We need to supply them with crude. So what do you think of ramping up production so that we are able to meet up with crude supply across the board? We still have international obligations, don't forget.
Yeah, so in terms of the consumption numbers, I think the government through the NNPC, or rather the NMDPR, has to be much more transparent. For over a year now, we don't know what the numbers are in terms of local consumption. Yeah, we can extrapolate using NNPC import data, which has been helpful a little. But in terms of actual truck outs from the depot, that is the purview of the NMDPRA. And since August 20th last year, 2023, they haven't published anything to that effect, which is quite sad. And is I say that is that does not meet up to the standards that the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021 was supposed to produce in terms of disclosures. I think there are a lot of work has done there by the NMDPRA. Now, in terms of ramping up production, yes, we need to be able to supply our local refineries, and I think based on the presidential directive, that some work has gone into that process in terms of how Dangote refinery and also I believe the Port Harcourt refinery will have security of supply to an extent from Nigeria. But there are a lot of things that has to go into that computation. We have crude oil supply obligations contracts that we've already gone into. We also have the crude for loan swaps that Nigeria have committed to. As at my last count, I think we have some between 130 and 150,000 barrels per day in terms of committed crude oil for loan obligations from now to 2030. So there are issues regarding how we can supply our domestic market, all right, with crude oil, but that is essential. Now, when you look at global factors, Nigeria is part of OPEC, and as of I think a few days ago, OPEC had extended production limits to the end of 2026. For Nigeria, our cap is around 1.5 million barrels per day. As of now, in terms of crude oil, excluding condensates, we are doing somewhere around 1.33 million barrels per day, which hasn't exceeded the cap. But the country has several times through its ministers said that we are going to ramp up production to 2 million barrels per day, including condensates. All right, based on the last comment by the Minister of State for Petroleum. If we were to look at that carefully, historically, condensates have accounted for just 15% of total crude oil production in Nigeria. 15% of 2.06 million barrels is around 300,000 barrels per day, leaving around 1.7 million barrels per day in terms of crude oil production. That exceeds the crude oil, the OPEC cap for Nigeria. It will be tricky to see how the government will navigate the production cap if we are going to push production beyond 1.5 million barrels per day. However, I still maintain that we still have a headroom of about 170,000 barrels per day in terms of meeting our OPEC cost of 1.5 million barrels. So we can maximize that window. We can maximize that roof. A lot of things have to be done there. In terms of my confidence, I'm a bit skeptical. Can it be done? Yes. But from throughout this year, we've maintained an average of 1.3 million barrels per day. And I'm wondering how what efforts can be put into the process. We've had reports of crude oil thieves being arrested, illegal refining spots being curtailed, and somehow the production numbers in the country has still averaged around 1.3 million barrels per day if you take the entire year. However, I think in the last couple of 5 months, we've added like 50,000 barrels per day on average. But that is still not enough. I think we have capacity. We should maximize the headroom, the window that we have in terms of production that we can have. The 2025 budget is around the corner. Things are still sketchy. We don't know what the production benchmarks will be. The pricing is going to be somewhere around $77 per barrel, if I'm correct. We don't know what the National Assembly will do regarding the numbers, perhaps hike the production value so that they can, as usual, accommodate more on certain projects. These are projections that we need to look out for and need to watch out for so that we don't misproject and raise false hopes and then still go ahead to borrow. Because when you have a bloated budget and you cannot meet up with your revenue obligations, then you have to go outside conventional streams of income to get money, which is borrowing. We already have a huge debt. National Assembly approved another $2 billion in the last 2 weeks. We probably don't want to increase our debt profile, but we need to be very, very pragmatic about how we budget and how we do production going forward. So it will be tricky and sketchy to see how government will push 2 million barrels per day, given that we have 1.5 million barrels per day in OPEC costs throughout 2025, unless something changes.
All right, then before I let you go, I know you attended COP29 and a lot of issues around clean energy, greener energy. That's been talk of the town, even at the ADIPEC conference, which I also attended. That's the talk everywhere. Everyone is looking at energy transition and all of that. What updates do you have for us? What are you learning?
All right, so I would say the energy transition debate is still maintaining its path. The transition will happen. It is when it will happen and how fast it would happen that is the issue. And what are the implications for Nigeria? Nigeria is like playing a double-edged sword. We have plans to decarbonize, and then we have plans to ramp up production of oil and gas at the same time, also ramping up consumption of gas at the same time. At the same time, decarbonizing and reducing emission costs, which might be difficult to play both sides at the same time. In terms of ramping up production, again, the financing for that is tricky. It's probably not there. All right. Locally, we are borrowing to finance our budget, so we do not have the money to invest in new oil and gas assets. Definitely, we have to invite investors from outside the country. These investors have obligations to meet climate targets, meaning that most of them are now cutting down emissions and cutting down oil and gas investment. So getting the investment in oil and gas going forward will be difficult, or it's actually quite difficult right now for the country. Right, but however, in terms of climate benchmarks, targets, transition, the debate is still ongoing. There is a joker on board. We know Trump has been elected, and Trump is pushing, his rhetoric is pushing for increase in oil production. He's supportive of oil and gas production in the US, trying to ensure that the US maximizes its oil and gas assets. He has downplayed climate change in the past. He will likely continue to do so. So in terms of how that will drive the United States policy at the federal level, at the national level for climate change commitments, that may be tricky. We had problem raising finance at COP29 compared to $1.3 trillion annually. We had $300 billion in commitments, just commitments. This is not money that has been given, just commitments. The US might not meet those obligations under Trump. The past obligations have not been met, not just by the US, but other Western countries. So yes, the energy transition debate has probably some hurdles going forward because of the election of Trump, and also because of the rising up of some far right-wing leaders across Europe. So there might be issues there, but with that is made, I think how Nigeria should approach the transition should be from a fiscal sustainability perspective. In terms of emission, we don't keep the scale globally. What we should be doing is trying to prepare our local economy for an era where crude oil sales may no longer be available to us to the extent that it is today. So we need to ensure that we get more revenue streams from diverse sources. We need to look more into our mineral sector and our metals sector, see how we can develop that area, play more on the global market, get more market share. It's easy to say, but there's a lot of work needs to be done. Tackle security to ensure that we don't have bandits or terrorists obstructing our production supply, ensure the business environment is good, reduce inflation, work on the exchange rate so that investors are confident that when they invest in Nigeria, they can take out their profits and realize their profits in due time. A lot of work needs to be done. We need to ensure that Nigeria is competitive enough to play in an economy that crude oil is less relevant. And we need to start doing that today.
Enebi Okpalowa is the head of Natural Resource and Climate Governance for JIT Nigeria. Do enjoy your week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, then let's look at market figures as I'm being joined by equities trader at Rostrum Investment and Securities Limited, Mr. Dele.